Hey guys, tonight we walk barefoot through a field of overripe grapes, squishing them under your toes as cicadas hum in the distance, and the twilight sky bathes everything in that sleepy lavender glow. The hills of ancient Nysa where no one's quite sure if you're dreaming or just a little wine-drunk roll endlessly around you. Somewhere off in the olive grove, a goat sneezes. That's the kind of night it's going to be. The story we're unraveling tonight isn't some grand war, epic or cautionary tale filled with thunderbolts and glory. No, this one's softer, quieter, muddier. It's about Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, revelry, and naps so powerful they accidentally spawn Western theater. Yes, you're about to float through a tale where masks talk, satyrs gossip, and dreams shape civilizations. But don't worry, you probably won't survive the boredom of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, because something tells me it's already very, very late. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a damp hill where vines curl lazily. Over everything, trees, rocks, the occasional forgotten amphora. The smell of fermenting grapes hovers in the air like a slow lullaby. In the distance, you hear slow flute music. Or maybe it's just wind whistling through hollow reeds. You're never quite sure in Nysa. This isn't some grand city. It's a fringe zone, mythically speaking. A sleepy mountain forest too chaotic for cartographers, too obscure for war, and too intoxicating for normal behavior. But to the Greeks, it was the perfect place to stick a strange god no one knew what to do with. You wander under a fig tree and spot something shimmering. It's not gold. It's not even magical. It's just morning dew. But in Nysa, even, dew feels theatrical. Everything here seems like it's waiting for a cue, a line, a moment to begin acting. You pause beside a mossy rock and notice scratching's ancient, sleepy graffiti. Not epic poems or grand declarations. Just doodles, wine goblets, goats, a lazy eye, half shut in eternal contentment. It's as if someone, somewhere, whispered, "Nothing serious happens here. Go lie down." And so, you do as you recline. In the shade of a myrtle tree, the vines seem to shift gently over your legs, tucking you in. The sun peeks through in golden lattice patterns, and suddenly, you're not alone. From behind a knotted bush emerges a figure, not tall, not imposing, but somehow radiant. He's barefoot. His hair is tangled with ivy. He's holding a cup of something suspiciously bubbly. He grins at you, as if to say, "Yes, I know. I'm fabulous." This, somehow, is Dionysus. He flops onto the grass beside you, spilling a little wine. He doesn't care. He seems more interested in a snail crawling up a nearby reed. For a god, he's surprisingly unassuming. There's no booming voice, no lightning, just the occasional hiccup. And here's your historical fact of the night. Dionysus is technically the last Olympian god to be accepted into the pantheon. He's the gatecrasher of Olympus, the velvet-robed misfit that mythology didn't know where to shelve. Quirky tidbit? His cult followers would sometimes wear fawnskin leggings and smear themselves with honey to imitate satyrs. Imagine your local yoga group, but drunk and in goat cosplay. That's basically ancient Dionysian worship. You both lie there in silence, watching ants navigate a dropped fig. And that's when Dionysus turns to you sleepy-eyed, content, and murmurs something almost inaudible. It's all just a story, you know? You blink. What is? All of it. The masks, the lines, the tears, even me. And then he dozes off. You sit there, unsure whether this is divine wisdom or just fermented nonsense. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a Thracian or Phrygian deity, an outsider god absorbed into the Greek system like a foreign exchange student who got really into parties. But right now, he's just a guy. A very sleepy, possibly tipsy guy. You look down and realize a trail of grapevines has crept up from the earth and is now gently curling around your wrist. Not tight, just comforting, like a seatbelt on a ride you didn't know you were on. You hear a distant giggle, then another, not human, higher pitched, mischievous, and out from the trees come tiny figures, satyrs maybe, or just very energetic. Squirrels with masks. They're prancing in circles, mimicking travelers, kings, even gods. One puts on a wobbly fake beard and moans dramatically. Oh no, my goats. They've been cursed by love. You don't know it yet, but you're witnessing the earliest stirrings of theater. Here, under this tree, while a god naps beside you, breathing softly, dreaming harder. You close your eyes too, not to sleep, just to listen to the strange rhythm of rustling leaves, to the laughter, to the whisper of vines telling stories they haven't written yet. And just like that, the stage is set. Dionysus stirs beside you with a soft, satisfied grunt, like someone who's just remembered a pleasant joke from a dream. You don't want to move too much. There's a kind of sacred laziness in the grove right now. The kind that should be bottled. And prescribed. You turn your head to watch him more closely. He's not snoring, exactly, but there's a rhythmic puff of breath through slightly parted lips. His wine cup has rolled a few inches away and is now cradled by the roots of a fig tree. Like nature itself is eager to catch the spillover. It smells like blackberries and maybe philosophy. You study his face. It's youthful, but in that weird, ageless way. He looks like someone who could be 22 or 2000. Soft curls tangled in ivy. A faint smudge of purple beneath. One eye either leftover festival paint or a grape stain he couldn't be bothered to wash off. This is Dionysus. Not the god of thunder, not the god of war, the god of things you can't quite explain. Ecstasy, madness, illusion, masks. The god of maybe it was real, maybe it was just really good theater. You watch a butterfly land on his sandal. He doesn't flinch. Now. Here's a mainstream fact to ground us again. Dionysus is one of the only Greek gods with a dual nature. He's both bringer of joy and sower of chaos. Wine doesn't just make you dance. It also makes you weep, rage, hallucinate, and call your ex at 2 a.m. Dionysus is the embodiment of that entire arc. He doesn't just get you tipsy, he gets you undone. You glance back at the satyrs in the clearing. They're now reenacting what seems to be a farming accident, complete with exaggerated falling motions and a chorus of goats bleating in horror. It's ridiculous, but also oddly precise. You find yourself watching like it matters. Like the story, even this silly one, is doing something ancient to your brain. And maybe that's part of his charm. Dionysus doesn't build temples out of marble. He builds them out of mood. Historians still debate whether Dionysus was originally a fertility god who evolved into something wilder as Greek society changed. Some claim he was imported from the East. Others argue he's purely Greek but always lived on the fringe. He's the deity you can't pin down with a straight-line origin story. He shapeshifts. He plays dress-up. He rebels. And he's always a little drunk. Not falling over drunk. Not embarrassing wedding toast drunk. Just pleasantly loopy. You get the feeling that if Dionysus wrote philosophy, it would start with, have you ever really looked at a fig? Your quirky tidbit for this section. Dionysus was once captured by pirates, who thought he was just some rich nobleman they could ransom. Mid-sea, he turned the mast into a grapevine, summoned a bear, as one does, and drove them all into the sea, transforming them into dolphins. So, next time you see a dolphin, remember, It might be a panicked former pirate who messed with the wrong picnic. You lie back and look at the sky. It's turning that sleepy peach color that only happens when time isn't really passing. You wonder what it would be like to be a god of something as nebulous as ritual madness. Do you clock in? Do you keep receipts? Or do you just roam the world, turning mundane experiences into fever dreams? Dionysus is now lying flat on his back, arms flopped open like a child after a tantrum. He mutters something in his sleep. You catch only one word: mask. And that's when it hits you. He's not just the god of wine. He's the god of theater. Not because he wanted to be, but because storytelling and intoxication and ritual all sort of ... collided. One long, accidental collision of humans trying to understand themselves by pretending to be someone else, preferably while wearing antlers. There's a rustle nearby. A new figure enters the scene, taller, solemn, with the half-hollow look of someone who's memorized way too many tragic monologues. He's wearing a mask, wooden, painted with a wide, unmoving smile. But the eyes behind it are tired. The satyrs hush and begin mimicking his motions. A bow, a gesture to the gods, a turn to the left. They're not being funny anymore. Now, it's ritual. A slow unfolding of emotion through movement. Theater is forming, not written, not rehearsed, but felt. This isn't entertainment. It's expression. It's pressure released through performance. It's the moment you tell the story because it would hurt more to keep it in. And Dionysus, still napping, has no idea it's happening. You blink and catch your reflection in a puddle. Your face looks older than when you lay down. Not aged dash, just ... Performed. Like someone who's already played several roles tonight. And there are more to come. That's the nature of Dionysus. You don't follow him, you dissolve into him. You don't pray. You participate. You lose yourself in movement, in laughter, in tears, in masks. And just as you're about to drift off, he stirs again. This time, he opens one eye, half-lidded, amused. Did I miss anything? Dionysus stretches like a cat, just waking up from a 100-year nap. He yawns without shame, then props himself up on one elbow and looks at you, blinking. Why are there tiny goatmen reciting poetry? He mumbles, eyes still adjusting to the sun. You open your mouth to answer, but it doesn't really matter. He's already distracted by something shinier, a beetle crawling across his wine cup, possibly with divine purpose. Then he sighs. It always gets weird when I sleep. You nod. You're beginning to understand that with Dionysus, weird isn't an accident. It's gravitational. He picks up the wine cup and gives it a lazy swirl. So, you want to hear how I got here? And just like that, he starts talking, not loudly, not formally, just in that rambling way people do when they're only half telling it to you and half telling it to themselves. You lie back in the grass and let his voice carry you. I was born twice, you know? Most people only manage once. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Technically, I started out human. My mom, Semele, was mortal. She was having a perfectly normal affair with Zeus, meaning not normal at all. And then Hera found out, which, as you might expect, complicated things. You pictured the scene. Semele, young and brave and completely in over her head, pregnant and glowing in all the wrong ways. Zeus had promised her anything classic move, and Hera, queen of Olympus and professional vengeance specialist, decided to give her a little nudge. Disguised as an old woman, Hera whispered poison into Semele's ear. If Zeus really loved you, he'd show you his true form. And so Semele asked. And Zeus, bound by a cosmic pinky promise, obliged. Here's your historical fact. The Greeks believed mortals could not survive the sight of a god in their full divine form. So when Zeus revealed himself, lightning, glory, cosmic intensity, Semele was instantly reduced to ashes. Which feels a bit overkill. But Greek mythology rarely favors subtlety. Dionysus sips his wine and shrugs. She exploded. What can you do? But wait, quirky twist incoming. Zeus, for all his chaotic energy, wasn't completely heartless. He rescued the unborn baby Dionysus and sewed him into his own thigh. That's right. A divine C-section, performed with celestial stitching. Shift in the grass, imagining that. Lightning bolts for thread. A newborn kicking inside a thunder god's leg like a sentient Charlie horse. Historians still argue. Dionysus continues, whether that makes me fully divine or just half-zapped. He laughs. Either way, I showed up on Olympus later. A little ... different. The other gods didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat. Some treated him like a curiosity, others like a problem. He didn't fit their mold, too fluid, too joyful, too erratic. He wasn't a builder like Hephaestus or a schemer like Hermes. He didn't hold grudges like Athena or swing hammers like Ares. He just danced. You watch him swirl his wine again, the surface rippling with sunlight. They didn't know what to do with me, so they sent me away. Said it was for my safety. Maybe it was. Here's the thing. The Dionysus you're talking to now doesn't seem bitter. There's no godly vengeance in his tone. Just ... nostalgia. Like someone remembering a youth both embarrassing and kind of magical. They put me in Nysa, he says, waving vaguely at the forest around you. Raised by nymphs, played with satyrs. Taught by Silenus that old goat could outdrink a volcano. He smiles, but there's something a little distant in his eyes. You try to imagine being a god who didn't grow up knowing he was one. Who only figured it out after getting kicked out of enough moral taverns and accidentally turning water into Pinot Noir. Dionysus continues. They didn't invite me to Olympus until much, much later. By then I'd grown up wild, joyful, strange, and very, very dramatic. That last part is said with a wink. You remember your quirky tidbit for this section. In some myths, Dionysus was raised disguised as a girl to protect him from Hera, which honestly feels like the origin story of every gender-fluid theater kid you've ever known. The gods of Olympus had their rules, their thrones, their lightning-slinging competitions. But Dionysus? He had the forest, the wine, the company of creatures who wore no masks because their faces already were masks. And maybe that's why he invented theater, not out of ambition, but because pretending was always more real than reality. You look at him again, this god who didn't quite fit, and suddenly it clicks. Dionysus isn't about excess. He's about release. About making space for the parts of you too wild, too soft, too chaotic to survive daylight. Semele never got to see me grow up, he says quietly. But I like to think she would have laughed at my first festival. The goats got too drunk and tried to marry a statue. You smile. He smiles back. You don't need to say anything else. The fig tree shades you both now, its leaves rustling like slow applause. Somewhere, a chorus of frogs begins a lazy, off-key chant, and you lie there. Together, the god who was born twice and the listener who came too late for Act 1, but just in time for intermission. Dionysus stands up with a lazy stretch, cracking his neck and brushing a few grape leaves off his chest. Let's go, he says, as if this whole forest were his living room, and you've both just decided to pop out for coffee. You follow him. Through the winding grove, vines parting gently before his steps. Birdsong flutters around you, but even that feels like it's waiting for a cue. There's something theatrical about the landscape, like the world is wearing a costume today. We're going on a road trip, he says, not looking back. A very weird one. And oh, you are not prepared. Dionysus's travels, as it turns out, were less spiritual journey and more unhinged mythological tour bus. He didn't wander quietly. He arrived in places like a surprise party. No one asks for complete with satyrs, wine fountains, and unsolicited dance numbers. Your first stop is Phrygia. Don't worry about the map. It's not important. What matters is that he meets Cybele here, the great mother goddess. And she's intense, crowned with towers, surrounded by lions. Kind of the boss-level version of a garden witch dot, she teaches. Him sacred rites, mysteries, masks, the power of performance as ritual. Think of it like Burning Man meets TEDx. Myths edition. Mainstream historical fact. The cult of Dionysus spread widely across the ancient world, especially in rural and border regions. Why? Because it offered release. For women, slaves, farmers, those. Without power, it promised a few wild nights of transformation. Shouts, drums, divine chaos. A break from reality. Most people are just one song away from unraveling, Dionysus says, tossing a fig to a nearby goat. I give them the excuse. From Phrygia, you stumble with him into Lydia, then Thrace, then Egypt. At some point, there's a lion pulling a cart full of musical instruments. You ask why. He shrugs. He was available. Everywhere he goes. His entourage grows stranger. Satyrs with panpipes. Maenads dancing until they collapse. A leopard named Carl who keeps stealing sandals. Dionysus collects oddballs like theater kids collect trauma, proudly. And then come the pirates. This is your quirky fact for today. One version of the myth has Dionysus captured by Tyrrhenian pirates who think he's just a rich young nobleman. Traveling alone. Huge mistake. They tie him up, though somehow the ropes won't stay knotted, and begin planning their ransom. Dionysus stays quiet, smiling. Moments later, the ship sprouts grapevines. Ivy coils around the mast. Wine pours. From the wood itself, a bear appears out of nowhere and roars politely. The pirates panic, jump overboard, and are instantly transformed into dolphins. Dionysus just sighs and keeps sipping. You float through this story like it's a fever dream. But there's a rhythm to it. A pattern. Wherever he goes, he brings. Confusion and clarity often in the same gesture. He terrifies cities, then heals them. He shows up unwanted, then becomes worshipped. His presence is always disruptive, but somehow also comforting. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a late addition to the Greek pantheon or an ancient chthonic deity older than the others. Was he foreign or native? A god of rebirth, or just very, very dramatic? The evidence is a muddle fragments. Pottery scenes, half-remembered chants. He refuses to stay still, even on paper. You and Dionysus arrive at a dusty town square somewhere along the coast. The locals stare, uneasy. The god leans in and whispers, "They think I'm trouble." He's not wrong. The town leaders approach with that cautious smile reserved for both high priests and tax auditors. They ask him to leave. He smiles back, says nothing. The next morning, half the town is dancing in the streets and the other half is weeping into amphory, unsure why they're both so relieved and so exhausted. You wander through the aftermath feathers in the fountain. Empty sandals by the statue of Hermes, a flute wedged into a loaf of bread. Somewhere, a goat is eating someone's toga. What just happened? You ask. Catharsis, he says simply. You don't push further. Somehow, it makes sense. Later, around a campfire made entirely of cinnamon sticks. Don't ask? Dionysus tells you that transformation is never tidy. People want change to feel logical, he says, swirling his wine in a seashell. But real change feels like wine poured into water sudden, irreversible, a little chaotic. You look up at the stars. One of them blinks. Or winks. You realize. Something deep and slow. Dionysus doesn't travel to teach people how to behave. He travels to show them what they've buried under manners and schedules and shame. He doesn't conquer, he uncorks. People always expect Apollo, he says. Clean lines, rational beauty, perfect order. But me? I'm the after party. And you believe him. By the time you're leaving this stretch of the journey, you've stopped asking what's real and what's symbolic. You're walking beside a god who was kidnapped by pirates, raised by nymphs, born from a lightning wound, and still, somehow, has grape juice on his chin. And honestly, it suits him. You find yourself in a new town, though it hardly matters which one. The pattern's already familiar. Stone streets, nervous glances, and the vague scent of wine clinging to the morning air. Dionysus walks ahead of you, humming a tune with no melody. People part as he passes, not because they recognize him, but because something inside them just says, "Step aside." He's got that kind of energy, but this time, it's different. This town doesn't want him here. Not in a hostile pitchfork and torch sort of way. More like a silent judgment from everyone who's ever served on a city council. Their robes are neat. Their temples are orderly. They believe in structure, in knowing your place, and most dangerously, in ignoring anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. Which, unfortunately for them, is exactly Dionysus' specialty. You sit beside him on the town steps as he watches their little rituals. A council meeting where nothing gets decided. A religious ceremony so rehearsed, it feels like bad theater. He tilts his head, intrigued but unimpressed. "They're afraid," he murmurs. "Of what?" You ask. He doesn't answer. But you notice the locals looking at his leopard skin cloak, his unshaven face, the little flute-playing satyr at his heels, chewing on someone's robe. They're not afraid of him. They're afraid of what he represents. And here's your historical fact. In many myths, Dionysus was rejected by cities who refused to recognize his divinity. But rejection never went well for them. The moment they tried to suppress him, that's when the madness started. Not because he punished them, but because they cracked under the pressure of pretending he wasn't already inside them. Historians still argue whether those tales are symbolic warnings about what happens when you suppress emotion, joy, or chaos for too long. Like blocking a stream until it bursts through the dam and floods your wine cellar. Later that afternoon, a statue topples mysteriously in the town square. A group of women, otherwise respectable and very bored, begin dancing in the olive grove without remembering why they left their homes. The town priest starts laughing and can't stop. People whisper the word madness, but you can feel it's more than that. It's release, rebellion, rhythm. You glance over and find Dionysus watching, not with smugness, but with something more complicated. Like a doctor watching a fever break. They try to resist, he says quietly, but pretending gets heavy. Eventually, they drop it. Here comes your quirky tidbit. In some ancient festivals honoring Dionysus, villagers would parade enormous, carved wooden phalluses through the streets to celebrate fertility, humor, and general Dionysian cheer. Not subtle, but highly effective at breaking tension. The town elders don't appreciate the impromptu parade that forms in the market square. There's drumming. There's grape juice being poured into ceremonial fountains. One particularly enthusiastic. Local attempts a cartwheel and pulls something deeply ungraceful. But it's too late now. The spirit has taken hold. The mask of normality has slipped, and behind it is something messier, louder, and more honest. That's always how it happens with Dionysus. He doesn't demand temples. He doesn't issue ultimatums. He just shows up, and either you let go, or you lose control trying to hang on. You stroll through the now slightly derailed city center, stepping over a broken lyre and a very confused rooster. Dionysus grins and tosses you a bunch of grapes. You don't ask where he got them. They think I'm a problem, he says, mock sulking. But I'm more like therapy. You nod. You're starting to see it. His divinity isn't about thunder or judgment. It's about digging down to the messy parts of yourself. The grief, the ecstasy, the craving to scream in the woods at midnight, and letting them speak. And yet, even here, there's resistance. A group of stern-faced philosophers is standing near the city gate, arms crossed, muttering. You can almost hear their arguments. He undermines reason. He disrupts order. He makes people laugh when they're supposed to bow. You glance at Dionysus. He smiles, unfazed. Let them argue, he says. They'll join the chorus eventually. He lies down in the grass beside the steps, curls of ivy already creeping toward him like affectionate pets. The air buzzes with late sunlight and faraway laughter. You sit beside him. Behind you, a new play seems to be forming in the town square, improvised, chaotic, beautifully alive. Someone's wearing a mask. Someone's pretending to be a god. Someone else is crying into a melon dot. It's perfect. The townsfolk may never admit he's a god, but they'll keep the rituals, the stories, the songs. They'll say it's tradition, or civic duty, or art. But really, they just needed an excuse to feel something again. And Dionysus? He's already asleep. Not out of boredom, but because his work here is done. You lean back, letting the grass tickle your neck, and listen as the laughter swells like a curtain rising. It starts with a yawn, a quiet, unremarkable stretch and sigh as Dionysus curls deeper into the grass beneath a fat-bellied olive tree. One arm drapes over his chest like he's cradling a secret. The sun dapples through the leaves, painting sleepy constellations on his bare shoulder. A few bees drift lazily nearby, too relaxed to sting. Everything slows down. You sit beside him, watching the vines inch toward his ankles again, almost like they're tucking him in. He lets them. Just a nap, he mumbles. And that's exactly what it is. Just a nap, except it's not. Because when Dionysus naps, things happen. You lie back too. The earth beneath you is warm, humming quietly. Somewhere in the distance, a reed pipe starts playing. Maybe no one's holding it. Maybe it's just the wind. Remembering the tune, and then, without any grand thunderclap or divine decree, Dionysus dreams. But this isn't just a god dreaming of clouds and wine and overly complicated love affairs. No, this dream spills. It seeps, like a puddle of ink sliding down into the waking world. At first, it's subtle. The breeze begins to shift, not in temperature, but in tone. The trees around the olive grove lean in ever so slightly, like an audience waiting for the first. Lying. A few satyrs wander out of the underbrush, scratching their bellies and blinking as if summoned by instinct. They don't speak. They pose. One stands on a rock. Another draws a crooked beard on his face with crushed berries. And just like that, a performance begins. No script, no stage, just movement. Mimicry, emotion. One satyr acts out a woman crying beside a river. Another becomes the river. A third stumbles in, arms flailing, a caricature of panic and hunger. It's absurd. And yet, something ancient stirs in your chest. You know this story. Even though no one's spoken a word, Dionysus snores softly beside. You mainstream historical fact time. In early Dionysian rites, especially those in rural Greece, participants would engage in spontaneous mimetic dancing and storytelling. These weren't formal plays. They were communal, messy, and deeply emotional rituals where everyday life was acted out to purge sorrow or celebrate joy. In other words, theater began not with playwrights, but with wine, masks, and a nap that got out of hand. More satyrs appear. Now there's a shepherd, a lost child, a donkey with suspiciously realistic braying sound effects. Someone starts singing. Another claps. The grove echoes. Still no audience. No one is watching. Exactly. But everyone is witnessing. You turn and glance at Dionysus. His eyelids flicker. You realize he's dreaming this. These characters, these fragments of story, they're pouring out of him like steam. His subconscious has puppets now. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. In some Orphic traditions, Dionysus is called the twice-born dreamer, not just because of his birth from Zeus's thigh, but because his divine essence was believed to exist between waking and sleep, between joy and grief, between chaos and meaning. That is where dreams become art. One of the satyrs trips and tumbles down a hill. The others gasp, then laugh, then all collapse in exaggerated weeping. It's slapstick meets tragedy, meets interpretive dance. And yet it feels like something real is happening here. Not because it's accurate, but because it's felt. Historians still argue. You think to yourself, whether this kind of ritual performance was religion, drama, or something else entirely. And maybe the answer is yes. You spot a woman in the distance. She's watching too, though not quite consciously. Her eyes are glazed, her hands twitching slightly, like she's being pulled into the rhythm without even realizing it. She hums, along with the satyr chorus. One of them turns, bows to her, and she blushes. It's not entertainment. It's invitation. And that's the core of it. Dionysian drama was never about applause. It was about joining in, letting go. Wearing a mask not to hide, but to speak from the place you're usually not allowed to. You feel it too. That tug. That little itch in your spine that says, stand up. Play something. Cry a little for no reason at all. You look again at Dionysus still sleeping. A small smile curls the corner of his lips. A drop of wine, where did that come from? Slips from the rim of his cup and soaks into the earth. A beetle climbs up his knee like it's scaling Mount Olympus. And then you realize, this nap? It's not idle. It's a spell. A fermentation. The moment before harvest. He doesn't make the performance happen. He dreams it into being. The satyrs begin chanting now. The shepherd weeps. The donkey transforms dramatically, obviously into a lost king, complete with a crown made of twigs. There's betrayal, passion, revenge, and redemption. All in grunts and squeaks and flailing limbs. You're riveted. You don't even realize you've been holding your breath. Then, silence. Everyone freezes. They look to the olive tree. To Dionysus. Still asleep. The wind changes. And they bow. The performance ends not with applause, but with sighs. As if something has been exhaled from the soul. One satyr lies flat on his back and fans himself with a grape leaf. Another pats you on the shoulder and says, "You were great in Act 3. You don't know what he means, but you nod politely. The dream is fading now. The vines retreat. The cicadas return to their usual rhythms. It's like the world pressed pause, told a story, then hit play again. Except now, something in your chest feels lighter. You glance once more at the god beside you, still sleeping. You whisper, "Thank you." He doesn't stir, but the wind rustles the leaves above in a way that sounds suspiciously like, "You're welcome." The olive branches above you sway gently, as if the grove is exhaling. The satyrs have vanished, or maybe they were never really there. Maybe they're just shadows the nap left behind. Either way, the clearing feels different now. Like the air has been stirred. Dionysus, still curled in sleep, murmurs something unintelligible and rolls onto his side. One bare foot dangles in a patch of thyme. His wine cup is empty now. Of course it is. And though nothing looks different, everything feels charged. You sit up, slowly, the kind of movement you make after waking from a dream that didn't feel like yours, but left its scent on your skin. Across the grove, you hear it again. Voices. But not the wild yelping of satyrs, or the groggy muttering of a god with a grape hangover. These are human voices, practicing, arguing, laughing. A new rhythm. You follow the sound. It leads you through the trees, down a slope, to a small glade you're sure wasn't there before. And in it, a scene unfolds. A group of mortals, mostly young, a few older. all dressed in tunics too short or sandals too loose, are acting something out. They take turns. One wears a crude mask, wide eyes, painted lips. Another clutches a walking stick and pretends to limp. A third throws his arms in the air and shouts, "My goats! They have betrayed me!" And everyone bursts into laughter. But it isn't just goofing around. There's an energy to it, a pattern, a story forming in pieces. You realize it's not a reenactment. It's a mutation of the dream you just saw. Passed from god to satyr to mortal, like yeast and dough. Something is rising. Here's your historical fact. The origins of Greek drama, according to Aristotle and a few other thinkers with intimidating beards, began not in polished theaters, but in dithyrambs, wild, ecstatic hymns sung and danced in honor of Dionysus. Over time, these gave birth to structured storytelling, with a chorus, a protagonist, and eventually, full plays. But it began here, in places like this, with people like this under trees, wearing masks, mimicking gods. You watch as one performer stumbles dramatically, then looks to the others, unsure what to do next. A girl in the back barefoot, arms crossed, shouts, "Die!" Slower! And the group collapses in laughter again. But then, they try it again. Slower this time, more feeling. The line is still ridiculous, but now it means something. The goats aren't just goats, they're betrayal. Their loss, or lunch. Who knows? But something is clicking. You sit quietly at the edge of the glade. Invisible, but present. One performer turns to another and mutters, "Should we write this down?" And there it is, the seed of permanence. The desire to remember, to repeat, to perform not just once, but again. To tell it better next time. To pass it on. That's when the masks come out. Simple ones, carved from bark and painted. With wine residue. They don't hide faces, they transform them. One moment, a boy's giggling. The next, he's a furious father. The mask isn't realistic, but it's effective. You see it now. The shift. This isn't a party anymore. This is becoming a thing. Dionysus's nap has gone viral. Historians still debate whether these early performances were sacred rites or just communal stress relief. But you're watching it happen, and the answer, again, is both. One performer clutches their chest, staggers backward, and shouts, "I was not born to be a goat farmer. I was born to scream at the moon." Everyone applauds. You don't know if it's part of the play or just a personal breakthrough. But honestly, what's the difference? You find your quirky tidbit for this section right in front of you. One of the performers has painted eyes on the outside of their eyelids so they can close their eyes while acting and still look awake. It's unsettling. It's brilliant. It's very Dionysus. You hear footsteps beside you. It's him. He's awake now, leaning against a tree, sipping from a fresh cup of wine you're 90% sure was conjured into existence by sheer willpower. He watches this scene in the glade. "They're getting better," he says, smiling. "They don't know you're watching. They don't need to." You glance over. His eyes are soft, proud, maybe a little glassy. "They're telling the stories now," he adds. "Even the ones I didn't mean to plant." You ask, "Do you control it?" He snorts. "Control it? I can barely control my sandals. No, I just ... give permission." And that's the heart of it. Dionysus doesn't direct the show. He whispers the invitation. Feel deeply. Pretend freely. Wear the mask and see what's behind it. You sit beside him as the performance goes on. There's no clear beginning or end, just waves of story. Laughter, tension, resolution. The performers argue, recast roles, rewrite the plot. The play becomes myth, becomes memory. Dionysus leans back. "I'll nap again soon," he says. "And when I do, maybe they'll write it down this time." You smile. and in the fading light as the chorus sings a melody that feels both ancient and brand new. You wonder how many dreams you've carried that weren't yours, and how many were Dionysus's. The next morning arrives like spilled honey slow, golden, and sticking to everything. Dew glistens on the grass, satyrs are sprawled over tree roots like dropped laundry, and the faint echo of a chorus still hangs in the air like it's trying not to leave. Dionysus is already awake. He's at the edge of a stream, barefoot, skipping stones. Not with any skill, he seems more amused when they plop rather than skim. He sees you and grins. "I had a dream," he says. You blink. "Another one. Different this time," he says. "Not mine. Theirs." He gestures vaguely behind you. You turn and find some of the mortals from last night's performance curled up together near the ash circle of an extinguished fire. One of them stirs and murmurs something about masks. Another hums the melody from the final chorus. Something's happening. Again, you sit beside Dionysus on a flat rock by the stream. He's watching the ripples like they're a script he's only half memorized. They're going to build something, he says, but they don't know it yet. What kind of something? A place, he says, where stories live. And there it is, the seed of the theatron, the viewing place. The ancient Greek theater wasn't born from marble and blueprints. It sprouted from mornings like this, when last night's performance lingers like wine in the throat, and someone says, "What if we did it again, but better?" Here's your historical fact. The earliest formal theaters in Greece, like the theater of Dionysus in Athens, were built into hillsides. No roofs, no curtains, just sky above, earth below, and a sacred space where stories could be sung, shouted, or wept into being. Dionysus trails his fingers in the water. "They'll say they built it to honor me," he mutters. But really, they built it to survive themselves. You ask what he means. He shrugs. People can only bottle up so much. Sooner or later, they have to let it out. The theater gives them permission to crack open, safely. Grieve a little, laugh a lot, pretend, so they don't fall apart. The satyrs begin waking up. One stretches dramatically and tumbles backward into a bush. Another starts beatboxing with a pair of stones. A third is building what looks like a throne out of mud and broken lyre strings. A group of mortals return with baskets of figs, olives, and something suspiciously like flatbread. They lay it all out in a loose circle. No one says breakfast, but everyone understands. Dionysus doesn't eat much. He prefers sipping, but he watches intently as two of the young performers from the night before start reenacting a scene half serious, half teasing. This time, though, they have a plan. They set up space, define entrances, introduce characters. Still masks, still improvisation, but now it's repeatable. You see it before they do. Ritual is becoming structure. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest actors in Greek drama were called hypocrites, literally answerers. They responded to the chorus, one voice stepping out of the many. That's where our modern word hypocrite comes from, ironically. Originally, it meant the one who dared to speak alone. Dionysus watches a young woman tie a ribbon around her forehead before stepping into the center. She's the first lead. He whispers. You ask if she knows that. No, he says. But her knees do. She begins a monologue, halting, clumsy, sincere. It's about a lost sibling, or maybe a lost sheep, or maybe both. But her voice shakes, and the grove stills. Everyone listens. Even the birds hush when she finishes. No one claps. That would feel wrong. Instead, someone quietly begins to sing, a low, repetitive chant. The others join in. The chorus is born again. Historians still argue whether these early performances were entertainment, civic education, or sacred ritual. But here, in this moment, They are all three braided together like the olive branches circling Dionysus's head. He leans back against a tree and closes his eyes. Not sleeping, not dreaming this time. Just letting, he says softly. People think I'm the god of chaos, but really? I just remove the filters. I let everything show. And that's scary? To some. To most. But it's also where the art lives. You nod. You feel it. The sacred mess of it all, another. The former steps forward, this one with a mask painted half joy, half grief. Their scene is even rougher than the last, but the audience is patient, supportive. You can feel the collective holding space for emotion, to unfold. No judgment, just witnessing. That's the power of the theater Dionysus leaves in his wake. It's not built in a day. It's built in moments like these, half-remembered, wine-stained, tangled in ivy and footnotes and goat jokes. But it lasts. You sit beside the god as the performance unfolds, and for the first time, the word audience feels sacred. Not passive, not separate, but necessary. The play needs them. The story demands their silence and breath and memory. Dionysus leans over, whispering like a confession. They'll build stone seats for this, carve acoustics into the hills. They'll say it's for the gods, but really, it's for each other. The performance ends. No one claps again, but someone brings more wine. And someone else starts humming a new melody, and Dionysus just smiles. By midday, the grove hums with preparation. Not the kind of bustling you'd find in a kitchen or in a battlefield, but a dreamy, meandering type of readiness, like everyone's pretending not to rehearse while definitely rehearsing. Someone's carving a mask out of cork bark with a spoon. Someone else is tying vines into makeshift stage curtains. There's an argument over who gets to die dramatically in the next scene. You hear someone shout, "You died last time." And someone else retort, "Yes, but this time I have a prop." Dionysus watches it all like a proud parent at a school play. If that parent were also barefoot, wine-scented, and periodically high-fiving a goat. He turns to you suddenly. "Come on, we need a hill." You follow him, past the grove, past the creek, up a slope that probably wasn't there yesterday. You emerge into a sun-drenched clearing. The grass here is short, flat, the kind of place that feels watched even when you're alone. Dionysus spins slowly in place. "This'll do." You ask what for. He raises an eyebrow. "The first theater, obviously." And just like that, he drops into the grass like a stone wrapped in silk, stretching out like he owns the entire hillside. Which, let's be honest, he probably does. This is where it'll start. He murmurs, hands behind his head. They'll build a stage. An altar. Rows of seats curving up like a shell. They'll come in thousands. Watch, weep, laugh, get sunburned. This hill? It'll echo for centuries. You blink at the empty space. It's hard to imagine now, but he sees it like it's already there, and he's not wrong. Here's your historical fact. The theater of Dionysus in Athens, nestled on the southern slope of the Acropolis, is considered the birthplace of Western theater. At its height, it could hold around 17,000 spectators. And it all began with a flat space, a chorus, and an altar to Dionysus in the center, the thymel. Historians still argue. Dionysus says, as if reading your thoughts, whether the altar was for sacrifice or symbolism. I say, why not both? You imagine the thymel, round and solid, like the heart of the performance. Not in the back, not off to the side right, in the middle. A reminder that even the most tragic monologue is part of something divine. Dionysus sighs. They'll formalize it soon. Competitions, judges, prizes. Someone will invent a program with actor bios and wine pairings. He pauses. Actually, I like that part. You glance at him. He's smiling, but there's something wistful in his eyes. What's wrong? You asked out, he shrugs. Nothing. Everything. It's just... When they start chiseling the rules into stone, sometimes they forget the playfulness, the dream, the ridiculous beauty of a drunk satyr pretending to be a goat, pretending to be a king. You lie back beside him. The clouds above drift in lazy spirals. One looks like a mask. One looks like a fig. One looks like an amphora that got left out in the rain. Below. Back in the grove, you hear the faint sounds of rehearsal again. Laughter. A groan of mock despair. Someone's trying to sing. In 3 keys at once. Someone else is composing a script entirely out of goat-based metaphors. You grin. Here's your quirky tidbit. Early tragic actors wore platform shoes called cothurni to appear taller and more godlike on stage. The higher the platform, the more important the character, which probably led to at least a few unplanned stage dives mid-soliloquy. Dionysus shifts beside you. It's going to grow, you know, bigger than me. You nod. They'll start writing things down. Scripts, stage directions, the correct way to perform a play. Eventually, they'll forget the messy beginnings. They'll forget that it all came from a nap, a laugh, and a need to feel. You stay quiet. There's nothing to say. He's not bitter. Just watching the world change from the edge of the dream he started. They'll honor me every spring, he says, eyes half closed. Festival of Dionysia. 3 days of theater. 1 day of drunken parades. Masks, music, endless talking. And you'll attend? You ask. Of course, he says, in disguise. In the crowd, sometimes as the actor, sometimes as the janitor, sometimes as the cry no one expected. He smiles. You imagine it. A packed theater, marble seats, and linen tunics. The whole city watching a tragedy unfold on stage while somewhere in the back, a figure in a hooded cloak sips wine and murmurs the next line under his breath. Dionysus, always present. Never still. As the sun begins to lower, casting long shadows down the hill, the god sits up. Come, he says. They're about to invent satire by accident. You laugh and follow. Back into the grove. Back to the noise, the chaos, the joy. Because this isn't just the birth of theater. It's the birth of remembering how to be. By now, the grove has transformed. No longer just a makeshift stage. It's something more, a living rehearsal room of the cosmos. Curtains made of vines. Seats that are tree stumps or laps or nothing at all. The performers have started assigning roles, though everyone keeps forgetting who's who halfway through. Today's theme? Love, betrayal, goats, and cucumbers. You didn't ask. You know better by now. Dionysus strolls through the chaos, arms behind his back, like a director surveying a masterpiece in progress. He says nothing, but every now and then, he pauses to taste the grape, pet a satyr, or dramatically recite a line. That wasn't in the script. There is no script. That's the beauty of it. Tonight, he says, turning to you, they'll perform for the moon. You blink. Why the moon? Because it never blinks, he replies. It always watches. Quietly, like the best audience. He's not wrong. As the sun begins to bleed behind the olive trees, torches are lit awkwardly, enthusiastically. Someone sets fire to a log. They weren't supposed to, but it all gets sorted. A few audience members drift in from nowhere. They don't ask where to sit. They feel where to sit. There's a hush. And then curtain up. Though, again, there is no curtain. Tonight's play is loosely titled The King Who Forgot to Dance, and it is glorious nonsense. A masked actor struts, on stage holding a wooden spoon like a scepter. Another, wrapped in a bedsheet, cries, I am the ocean. Someone playing a goat keeps bleeding at the wrong cues, but with such commitment you're moved anyway. But then it happens. A moment. One actor, barely older than a teenager, steps forward, mask in hand. No grand gestures. No silly accents. Just one line. I kept my joy in a jar, and now I can't find the lid. The laughter dies. The torchlight flickers. A wind slips through the trees, slow and heavy, like a sigh. And just like that, the grove remembers why this began. Mainstream historical fact. The three major genres of ancient Greek drama tragedy, comedy, and satyr plays all emerged from Dionysian festivals. These weren't just social events, they were spiritual catharsis. Audiences wept, laughed, gasped in collective release. To see others live pain and absurdity on stage made their own burdens a little more bearable. Dionysus watches the play not as a god demanding tribute, but as a human who understands. The kind who knows what it means to cry during a puppet show, or to see your own worst fear reflected in a man wearing sandals and shouting into the night. They don't even know what they're doing, he says quietly, leaning toward you. But it's real, you whisper back. He nods. Somewhere in the second act, the satyr chorus invades the stage with flutes and an interpretive dance that may or may not involve competitive grape stomping. A critic in the back, there's always one, mutters something about lack of thematic cohesion. A nearby satyr hands him a fig and tells him to hush. You catch your quirky tidbit right there. In certain Dionysian festivals, audience members were known to shout advice, heckle, or even throw food at the stage, especially during comedies. It wasn't rudeness, it was participation. The boundary between performer and spectator was deliciously thin. The final scene plays out under a sky swimming with stars. The king character removes his spoon scepter, kneels, and says, I remember now. The dance is the crown. Everyone claps, some because they understand, some because it's over, and some because they're still unclear if this is fiction, or a deeply personal confession disguised as a vegetable-themed tragedy. The cast bows. Someone throws olives. A mask falls to the dirt and cracks perfectly in half. And Dionysus? He stands and applauds. Once. Slowly. A priest would call it blasphemy. A philosopher might call it hysteria. But here? This is worship. You sit on a log beside a half-sleeping satyr who mumbles, Did you cry during the goat monologue too? You nod. Of course. You notice something strange. Not strange like goat wearing a crown of celery. You've adjusted to that. No, stranger than that. You look around and see no visible temple, no altar, no priest. But the ground feels holy. The torches glow with a kind of reverence. The air hums like a held breath. Historians still argue. You mutter aloud, whether these plays were religious experiences or just stories. Dionysus, now sipping from a cup filled with starlight and possibly regret, turns to you and says, You still think there's a difference? You don't. Not anymore. Because what you just witnessed wasn't just a play, it was a mirror. Tilted, warped, clown-nosed maybe, but a mirror nonetheless. A place where people saw themselves more clearly by pretending to be someone else. That's the paradox of the mask. It hides you just enough to let your truth speak dawn as the actors start dozing off in piles. Masks beside them like fallen leaves. Dionysus stretches his arms above his head. I think, he says, they're ready. Ready for what, you ask? He grins. The real audience. You shiver. Not from fear, not from knowing. The glow fades. Into moonlight. The performance is over. But the theater? It's only just begun. The grove by dawn is quieter than usual. No flute solos. No satyrs juggling olives. Just bird song and the faint whisper of leaves that seem to remember last night's applause. You sit up slowly, a mask still clutched in one hand. The paint has smeared onto your palm red, blue, gold. The colors of dreams. The colors of pretending. Dionysus is already up, of course. perched on a boulder like a cat with an opinion. He's watching the horizon, where the sky is turning from bruised violet to something gentler. They're changing, he says, not turning to you. You glance down at the performers, half buried in cloaks, hair tangled with fig stems in sleep. They're just tired. You say, "No," he replies. "They're transforming." He hops off the rock and starts pacing, energized in that way only a god can be after wine, theater, and a 3-hour nap on a bed of moss. "It's time," he says. "For what?" You ask, already knowing the answer. "For Athens, double quotes, the big stage." He grins. They're ready for a crowd. And he's not wrong. Here's your historical fact. By the 5th century BCE, Athens hosted the city Dionysia, a multi-day festival celebrating Dionysus with parades, rituals, and a full program of tragic and comic plays. These performances became civic events. Attendance was expected. Plays were state-funded. And playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides transformed earlier rural rituals into high art. You begin the journey without really deciding to. The grove fades behind you, not disappearing, just tucking itself away, like a playset waiting for its next cue. Dionysus hums as he walks, sometimes skipping, sometimes breaking into spontaneous pirouettes with no warning. "They'll put my name on the tickets," he says, laughing. "But they'll forget the messy bits, the tears, the frogs, the time someone got stuck in a tree because you tried to be a literal vine." You smirk. Will they remember you? "Parts of me," he says. "The fun parts. The ones that don't challenge them too much." You walk in silence for a while, and the path slowly changes. First it's dirt, then pebbles, then stone laid neatly in rows. Civilization creeping in with sandals and scrolls and strongly worded opinions. And then, Athens. Not the grand marble vision you might expect, but bustling, smelly, alive. Streets tangled with chatter. Vendors shouting about olives and dried fish. Philosophers mid-rant. Someone arguing over a cloak. Someone else dramatically reciting poetry to a goat. But amidst all of it, flyers. Painted announcements. Word of the festival of Dionysus. You can feel it. Something is about to happen. The performers from the grove arrive behind you, a little dazed, blinking at the noise. One clutches their favorite mask. Another hums a melody that turns a few heads. They move like ghosts and prophets, out of sync with the city, but not for long. Dionysus is already gone, or invisible, or disguised as the sandal mender leaning too close to a group of giggling actors. That's his way. You head to the theater side. It's not quite finished stone benches, still dusty, scaffolding leaning against the side, but it already holds weight. The air is charged. You stand at the center, the orchestra, the circular space for the chorus, and look up at the tiers of seats rising into the blue. And there it is again. That feeling, witnessing, anticipation, like the stones themselves are holding their breath. Here's your quirky tidbit. During these festivals, the front row seats, the prohedria, were reserved for priests, officials, and prominent citizens. But on certain days, slaves and women were allowed to attend as well, making the theater one of the rare spaces where all of Athens could feel something together. You wander backstage, or what will be the backstage. A few performers are building makeshift masks from linen soaked in plaster. One is panicking about forgetting their lines, even though there are no lines yet. Another has decided to wear 2 masks at once and refuses to explain why. The energy is electric. You spot Dionysus again, this time disguised as a wine merchant offering ambition in a bottle. The nervous playwrights. He winks at you and disappears behind a curtain that doesn't lead anywhere. And so the cycle begins. Scripts are drafted. Rehearsals take shape. The city leans forward, hungry. And beneath it all, the god who napped. Historians still argue. You hear someone say nearby, whether theater civilizes or corrupts the soul. You smirk, because you've seen the answer. You felt it in the dirt of the grove, and the silence after the final line. Theater doesn't civilize, or corrupt. It reveals, it peels back the careful mask of daily life, and shows us what we are when no one is pretending. Or, paradoxically, when everyone is. You take a seat in the back row as the sun begins to lower. The stage is almost ready. The actors are in place. And some are laughing, sipping, half watching. Dionysus waits for the first line, for the first gasp. For the first moment when someone in the audience sees themselves not in the hero, but in the fool. And something shifts. Not just a play, but a beginning. You never hear the trumpet. There's no formal announcement. No booming voice from the heavens declaring, "Let there be drama." Just a flicker of shadow across marble seats. A hush that spreads like ink in water, and then it begins. The festival of Dionysus in full bloom. The city has changed. Athens now vibrates at a different frequency. Shopkeepers close early. Couriers mutter lines from plays under their breath. Even the fishmongers in the agora argue in iambic meter. Everyone is a little louder, a little bolder, a little more dramatic than usual. And yet no one calls it strange. It's just theater season. You sit tucked between a stonemason and a woman with a toddler in her lap. Neither seems particularly religious, but both are here, perched on sun-warmed stone, eyes fixed on the stage below. That's the magic of it. This isn't only for the elite. It's for anyone willing to sit still and feel something uncomfortable. Dionysus, of course, is in disguise again. Today, he's an old man with impossibly white eyebrows and a wineskin that never runs dry. He keeps offering sips to people around him, whether they want them or not. He catches your eye and nods, once like an understudy finally getting their cue. Then, the chorus enters. 12 men, masked, robed, synchronized. Their footsteps form a rhythm that echoes against the limestone. And the story begins not with one voice, but with many. Here's your historical fact. The earliest Greek tragedies featured only a single actor interacting with the chorus. Over time, innovators like Aeschylus introduced a second actor and, eventually, a third. This simple evolution transformed theater, allowing for real conflict, character development, and dramatic tension. Today's play is a tragedy, of course. This is Athens. Laughter is scheduled for later in the week. The plot, as far as you can tell, involves a king who ignores a prophecy, a daughter who knows too much, and a sacrificial goat that might be a metaphor for free will. But you're not here for the plot. You're here for the breaks. The moments when something splinters, when the chorus pauses, and the actor stands too long in silence. When a hand trembles. When a line is delivered not from the throat, but from the gut. One performer falls to his knees, mask tilted just enough to show the tears underneath. It's not elegant. It's not perfect. It's true. And suddenly, your stonemason neighbor leans forward, eyes glassy. The woman beside you clutches her child a little tighter. You glance around the amphitheater. Thousands. All leaning in. All feeling together. That's the miracle. Theater doesn't change the world, but it reminds the world it can change. And then comes the twist. A character confesses betrayal. A friend becomes an enemy. The chorus moans. Someone in the crowd lets out a gasp too loud to be polite. The sun shifts behind a column. Dionysus smiles. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some actors in Greek tragedy were so beloved and so typecast that entire roles were written just for their range of sobbing, shouting, or noble death scenes. 1. Famous performer allegedly died of laughter during a comedic performance. Whether it's true or not, it's exactly the kind of ending Dionysus would approve of. The play spirals toward its end. Blood-painted. In saffron pools at the actors' feet. The chorus wails in synchronized grief. The final line echoes across the marble. Even gods forget, but mortals remember. And then silence. A long, aching silence. No music. No bow. Just the echo of humanity laid bare. And then applause. Thunderous. Communal, raw. The kind of applause that isn't about liking the play, but needing to respond to it. Dionysus rises slowly, tips his cup toward the stage. That, he says, was decent. You laugh. He nods toward the crowd. Now they'll talk about it for weeks, recast it in taverns, retell it with details they invented just to sound clever. That's how it lives. You ask, will they remember you? They'll remember the name, he says. They'll forget the mess. The sun begins to dip, painting the theater in gold as the crowd filters out slowly, reverently. You stay seated. You watch the actors remove their masks. One wipes sweat from his face and smiles weakly at a child who waves from the front. Row! Another helps her castmate to her feet, both of them limping a little from hours in thick robes and platform shoes. It's not divine. It's human. And that's what makes it sacred. Historians still argue. Dionysus says as he leans beside you, whether these performances were spiritual rituals or artistic innovation. He tilts his head. But what's art if not spiritual in disguise? You can't answer. You don't need to, because you felt it, the quiet after the last line, when thousands of hearts beat just a little differently than before. And somewhere, in that stillness, a god nods. The next play begins in the morning. Morning sneaks into the city like a cat through an open window silent. Curious, already shedding sunlight everywhere. You wake with dust in your hair and theater still in your bones. The city stirs too, but it doesn't rush. Athens in festival. Mode is less about schedules and more about moods. Today's mood: anticipation and possibly a hangover. The theater of Dionysus is empty for now, save for a few birds on the topmost seats and a stray poet scribbling verses about an angry olive tree. The stage is being swept with laurel branches. Not because it needs sweeping, but because someone once said it brings good luck. And now it's tradition. Dionysus, ever the morning person despite being deeply committed to nightlife, materializes beside you, holding 2 cups of what he claims is breakfast wine. You don't ask what's in it. You sip. It tastes like courage, sunlight, and possibly regret. Today, he says with a twinkle, is comedy. You raise an eyebrow. I thought theater was already a comedy. He laughs. Tragedy is a knife. Comedy is the bruise it leaves behind. He's not wrong. Here's your historical fact. While tragedy dealt with fate, gods, and downfall, comedy, especially, old comedy in classical Athens was raucous, satirical, and unapologetically weird. Think masks with giant mouths, actors in padded costumes, political jokes, fart sounds, and a whole lot of references to bodily functions. Aristophanes was the rock star of the genre, and subtlety was not his strong suit. By midday, the seats are filling again. The mood is lighter. People bring snacks, cushions, and the kind of attitude that says, I'm emotionally ready to laugh until I accidentally confront my deepest insecurities. The chorus enters in bright costumes. Some wear fake bird wings. Others are dressed like clouds. One is a talking vase. The story? Well, let's say it involves a man who marries a fish to escape taxes, only to find out the fish is running for public office. It's satire, barely disguised, directly naming politicians. In the audience? Absolutely. The crowd howls. Dionysus beams like a proud grandparent, watching a child perform in a toga that keeps slipping. And that's the thing. Comedy isn't just a laugh. It's a release. After a tragedy peels your heart open, you need something to stitch it back together with joy. You lean back and let the madness unfold. A giant papier-matched donkey just accused a philosopher of stealing its dreams. A man in a tunic, made entirely of onions, delivers a surprisingly poignant monologue about loneliness. Someone throws a grape. It lands on a judge's lap. The judge eats it. It's absurd. It's brilliant, and it's necessary. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some comedic performances ended with entire choruses breaking the fourth wall to directly plead for applause, wine, or votes. Subtlety? Not even a suggestion. The chorus might say, "If you like this play, tell your neighbor and bring snacks tomorrow." It's what marketing departments would one day call audience engagement. You glance over at Dionysus. He's crying. Tears run down his cheeks, not from grief, but from sheer laughter. He wipes them with his sleeve, hiccups once, and says, "It's ridiculous. It's perfect." You ask if he prefers comedy or tragedy. He considers. Tragedy opens the wound. Comedy teaches you how to dance with it. And isn't that just it? As the play wraps up in a chaotic dance involving fish scales, lyre solos, and a goat in sunglasses, the crowd erupts in applause. No standing ovation. This is ancient Greece. But there's foot stomping, whistling, cheering in iambic pentameter. One man proposes marriage to the lead actor. The actor politely declines. His costume makes sitting difficult. The theater breathes again. Dionysus takes your arm and leads you down the stone rows into the hum of people discussing their favorite scenes, the best jokes, the weirdest moments. They think I'm just about madness and wine, he says as you walk. But this, laughter, this freedom to look foolish and still be loved, that's the real gift. Historians still argue, he adds, mockingly scholarly, whether comedy served a political function or was just escapism. He stops, looks you dead in the eye. It's both, he whispers. Everything is both. You look back toward the stage. The actors are removing their masks again, smiling, joking, leaning on each other like tired clowns who just outran the truth and got away with it. But you saw what happened. For a moment, the world did change, even if only for a few lines, even if just enough to make someone feel a little less alone. The sun dips again. Shadows lengthen across the seats. And you realize something. In this city, on this hillside, wrapped in story and echo, you're not just watching history. You're inside it. The god, beside you, hums a familiar melody. The same one from the grove. The one that started it all. The sun sets slower now, as if even Helios doesn't want the festival to end. Athens glows with the warmth of wine, laughter, and collective catharsis. Everywhere you walk, you catch snippets of plays retold from memory, half accurate, half improvised. A fish becomes a bird, a king becomes a goat, and the chorus of clouds is now somehow a bakery. Theater, it seems, has leaked into everything. You pass a group of children reenacting yesterday's comedy using sticks, sandals, and the world's most dramatic fig. They shout over one another, arguing about lines, and one kid insists that his character is an immortal onion with feelings. You nod approvingly. Dionysus watches too, leaning against a column with one foot kicked up like a bard with nowhere to be. "See that?" he murmurs. Not even 6 years old, and already rewriting the canon. You smile, but even as the streets, something shifts. The tone softens, grows heavier. A kind of hush tiptoes into the city, not fear, not sadness exactly, but reverence. Tonight is the final night, the last performance of the festival, and it's a satyr play, not comedy, not tragedy, something in between. Here's your historical fact. At the Great Dionysia, each playwright presented a trilogy of tragedies followed by a satyr play, a short, bawdy, often absurd performance starring mythical half-goat creatures, behaving outrageously. Think of it as an emotional exhale after hours of noble suffering. Satyr plays mocked the very tragedies they followed, reminding everyone that no story is too sacred for a punchline. The amphitheater fills again for the last time this year. It smells like sweat, laurel, and roasted nuts. The audience is tired, but eager, like children staying up too late, hungry for one more tale. You sit closer to the front now. Dionysus slinks into a priest's empty seat and waves at the actors backstage, who gasp as though the statue just winked at them. He probably did. The satyrs enter with a clatter hooves stomping, laughter cackling, wine skins sloshing. They are loud, crude, ridiculous. One falls flat on his back trying to flirt with a tree. Another gets into a wrestling match with a donkey that turns out to be part of the set. The plot? Well, technically, it's about a hero returning from war and trying to reclaim his lost vineyard. But mostly, it's about fart jokes, suggestive flute playing, and several deeply committed actors dressed as Grapes. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all this nonsense, something lands. A line, thrown out casually. The war took everything but our music. And suddenly, everyone stops laughing. Just for a second. You look around. You see it in their eyes. The satyr stumbles, catches himself. Burps. Laughter returns. Bigger than before. That's the magic. Not the joke. The timing. Here's your quirky tidbit. Scholars believe satyr plays helped audiences transition emotionally from the gravity of tragedy back into daily life. Without them, the shift would be too sharp, too brutal. They were the theatrical equivalent of someone squeezing your shoulder after a funeral and telling a story that ends in a snort laugh. Dionysus watches the play with a smirk. They mock everything, he says. Even me. You glance at the stage, where a satyr is currently mimicking Dionysus himself, robe crooked, crown of ivy askew, stumbling around muttering, "Where's my wine?" Like a lost uncle at a wedding. They worship me, he adds, and he's right, because mockery here is sacred. It means you matter. If they can laugh at you, you've lived long enough to become a part of them. The final scene devolves into chaos, as all good endings do. The satyrs start a conga line. A chorus member leaps into the audience and steals a date from someone's snack pouch. There's a spontaneous kazoo solo. None of it makes sense, and it doesn't have to. The crowd roars. Not just with laughter, but with relief. Like exhaling after holding your breath for 3 days. Historians still argue, Dionysus says with a lazy grin, whether these plays were structured therapy or divine mischief. He leans closer, whispering, but the truth is, they're the same thing. The play ends in a pile of bodies, laughing, tangled, joy-drunk. And the audience. They stand, they cheer. They don't want it to end. And that's the tragedy no one writes down. That the festival, like the best dreams, has to fade. As people file out under the rising moon. You stay seated beside Dionysus. He doesn't speak. He just watches as if taking one last look at something. He knows he'll never fully get back. But he's not sad. Just full. Like a story that found its ending, even if no one knows exactly where. The beginning was, and as the amphitheater empties and the torches burn low, he murmurs, "They'll come back." Every year, every time their hearts get too heavy. He looks at you, and when they do, I'll be here. Laughing, crying, masked, unmasked, always. The wind shifts. The stars blink. Somewhere, a satyr sings off key. You don't know it yet. But tonight will echo in your dreams. Not the jokes. Not the lines. But the feeling of it. The knowing that this sacred silliness, this grief wrapped in music, this absurd divine accident was theater. And theater, dear listener, was never really about the gods. It was always about you. You wake before dawn, not because anything startles you, not because there's a noise or a nudge, but because your heart feels oddly empty, like you've just finished something beautiful and don't know where to put your hands. The festival is over. The wine jugs are dry. The masks lie in piles, soft with dust. The stage is quiet, wrapped in shadow. Only the wind moves soft, gentle, like a sigh through an open curtain. You rise slowly, joints creaking from too many days sitting on stone. Your feet remember the slope of the theater steps better than your mind does. It's as if your body's reluctant to forget, even as the city tries to move on. Dionysus is there, naturally, sitting on the edge of the orchestra like a student after class, legs dangling, eyes glazed not with sleep, but with memory. He doesn't say hello. He doesn't have to. You sit beside him without a word. Together, you watch Athens yawn into morning dot in the distance. The Acropolis glows with the pale blush of first light. Temple columns rise like spines of ancient beasts, holding up the sky out of habit. But down here, on this stage, the world feels small and close. You can still hear the last echoes of laughter, of grief, of that one guy who tried to solo on the panpipes and almost swallowed one. I'm glad you stayed. Dionysus murmurs. You nod. You're not sure if he means stayed through the festival, stayed in the theater, or stayed awake this long in a dream that never quite breaks. He glances at the discarded masks piled on a stone ledge nearby. They'll clean those up soon. Store them. Label them. Pretend they're relics. Aren't they? You ask Dot. He chuckles. Relics are things we've already decided not to touch again. Here's your final historical fact. After Golden Age of Athens, many elements of theater became codified scripts preserved, roles formalized, styles rigid. What began as sacred improvisation gradually hardened into tradition. Some say something was lost. Others say something was finally found. Dionysus shrugs, as if to say, both can be true. He stands, stretching like a cat. You want to know the best part of all this. You nod. They'll forget, he says, and they'll come back. Over and over, not just to this hill, but in every school auditorium, every living room performance, every whispered story told by flashlight. You tilt your head. That doesn't bother you? He shakes his head. I didn't invent theater to be remembered, he says. I dreamed it so people could feel, whether they know my name or not. He picks up one of the masks, a simple one, painted with both a smile and a frown, divided down the middle. He places it gently on the stone altar dot, then he turns to you. You're part of it now. You blink. Me? You felt it. You laughed. You wept. You watched the world pretend and believed it anyway. That's all it takes. He starts to walk away, barefoot, fading. Will I see you again? You call. He doesn't answer with words. Just a wink, and then he's gone. You sit there a while longer, alone, but not alone. The morning sun stretches across the marble seats. A breeze lifts the edges of a forgotten costume. Somewhere in the city, someone sneezes and a dog barks. Life goes on, but theater lingers. You rise, brushing dust from your legs. The mask still lies on the altar, grinning and grieving at the same time. You leave it there, because the next person will need it, Dot, and because you now understand. The stage was never really made of wood or stone, Dot. It was made of you. Now your journey slows. The theater fades. The applause grows faint. The gods grow still. You step away from the stage, not hurriedly, not lost, but gently, like the end of a lullaby. The marble cools beneath your feet. The city of Athens, once roaring with song and satire, sleeps again under a quilt of dawn. And you carry the stories, not just of Dionysus, the barefoot god who dreamt of masks, but of every voice that rose to meet silence, every heart that cracked open for a stranger in a costume, every laugh that slipped through grief like sunlight through olive leaves. The masks rest now that the crowd has gone, but the echo stays. The whisper of something once alive, still shimmering in your chest. Take a breath, a slow, warm one. You've wandered through madness and music, through tragedy and joy. You've sat beside a god who stumbled into theater by accident and in doing so, handed humanity a mirror. Hold that mirror softly now. Let it reflect your calm. Let it cradle your thoughts. Smooth your breath, slow your pulse. And if somewhere, in your dreams, a flute plays faintly, or a satyr waves from the shadows, or a figure in ivy smiles from a stage made of stars, smile back. Because the play goes on, and sleep, dear traveler, is just the next act.